Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Raza Foundation and the India International Center, we welcome you to this 47th in a series called Art Matters that we run here in collaboration with the IIC. There used to be panel discussions, and of late we converted them into conversations. Pick up a major figure and make him or her talk. And we are very happy that you are here in a large number, vindicating our choice of the evening. We have with us, as you know, one of the best known vocalists of Carnatic music today, Todur Madabusi Krishna. I hope I did not commit too many mistakes in that pronunciation.
Not too many.
He is, of course, a top performer, but he is also a very thinking musician, and we don't have many of them, incidentally. It is one area in which both music and dance perhaps are these two areas in which there are not many people who think about what's happening in the world around, what's happening in terms of social reality that surrounds us. And M Krishna is one of them who not only feels very strongly, but also articulates his views very powerfully, very candidly. So we have a very unusual musician. I was just thinking this morning that if I were to invite such another musician, who would he or she be? Most of them would talk about their music, their struggles, which is fine. I mean, they're great musicians, so they have every right to talk about it. But also to talk about what's happening to us. So we are very, very fortunate. He had delivered earlier the Kumar Gandhar Memorial Lecture, where, some of you would remember, he questioned the notion of the classical itself in a very significant way, an illuminating way. And to talk to him is Ananya Vajpeyi, my adopted daughter, I must add. There were many times when I was asked this question. So she again is a very articulate young intellectual who has been reacting to what's happening around us. And she is one of the few social scientists that we have who are commenting. Yeah, please occupy the seat so that you. I should have asked you to do that earlier. And she has been, her first book, Righteous Republic, The Political Foundations of Modern India, and she is with the CSTS. It was she who was very keen that M Krishna should come and speak to us this afternoon. So I roped her in that you make M Krishna talk. Now the rules of the game are simple. It is the job of Ananya to keep on provoking M Krishna to talk at length. And this can go on for about 45 minutes to an hour. And then we open it to the house, and you be ready with your questions, brief, witty, sharp, but not languorous and those kind of things. So there you are, M Krishna being talked to by Ananya Vajpeyi. And that's my job is over. This will be shifted so you can see them better.
Ashokji, I think you're probably not aware the problem is not to get Krishna to start talking. Good evening, friends. I have to say that I've been privileged to share a stage with many interesting and extraordinary people, but I've really never, possibly ever been so honored and excited as I am today to be talking with Krishna. Very recently, somebody made a cartoon with 3 different Krishnas in it, and one of them says Carnatic royalty, and he's sort of this hoity-toity singer. The next one says revolutionary, and he's raising some slogan, and the last one says rogue.
It actually says rowdy. It's far better word.
Rowdy. I'm sorry, rowdy. Much more appropriate in a town context. But as you know, of course, he is a singer, who sings as well as he speaks. He's a musician, a mountaineer, a writer, thinker, a teacher, and a troublemaker. Lately, at the place where I work, CSDS, we've been reading for the last month all of these ancient texts, classical texts, very carefully. And we were doing some readings in the Buddhist canon, and I came across a word, an epithet for the Buddha, which is Kalyana Mitra, right? A friend who brings auspiciousness, good things, good luck to you. The Buddha is a Kalyana Mitra to all beings. I was very struck by this expression because I think Krishna plays this role for a lot of people. He has, certainly for me. First time I heard him speak was in this very room, deliver the Kumar Gandhar Memorial Lecture. Ashish Dao brought me to it. He was speaking about what is the classical. It was hardly less than 3 years ago. And ever since then, thanks to him, thanks to his voice, thanks to his music, I've become introduced to a whole new world of medieval religion, early modern art, Tamil and Telugu, lyric poetry, music, an entire canon of Carnatic music, and this whole world of art and culture in South India that I didn't know anything about, and which has now become part of my daily life through an immersion in his music. So his voice has really acted as this Kalyana Mitra as far as I'm concerned, and that's why we're here today. Most importantly, I think what I have learned and seen and come to know through him is a whole range of people that he works with, that he collaborates with, artists, activists, students, all kinds of people in a kind of community that has grown up around him. Many of whom have now become my friends. Many are based down south in Chennai. The kind of energy, creativity, inspiration that is really in short supply these days, I think, and is really much needed for all of us who are so exhausted by our political circumstances, by the way our world is increasingly becoming. So he never allows one to thank him in any way. But I think with all of you as my witness today, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you, Krishna, for bringing so many good energies into at least my ambit, but I'm sure it's the same for many of you. Now the question is, of course, of intention and of awareness, right? Did you intend to do this? Were you aware of it? Which takes me to my first question to you today. Many times when you sing, after you've sung, you say, oh, it wasn't really planned. It just worked out that way. You've talked about going with the flow in your music, in your life in general. So what place do you give to intention and to awareness in your art?
Well, if I was going to have a conversation with M Krishna in 1998, I'm not exactly sure what conversation we could have. The person I was in terms of my ideas or my whole intention of being a musician, singing, was entirely different. I am born in Carnatic royalty. I am born in the inner circles, the inner of the inner circles. And I had all the privilege that you can imagine to get into the world of the Carnatic world, which is privilege of everything, social, political, economic, even some kind of aesthetic privilege of sorts. So I learned music like many other people did. Once I started performing, I was like any other young musician who wanted to make it big, travel the world, get the applause, and that's what I did. I did that for many, many years. So why I'm saying that is, if you look at intention in terms of awareness and intention, there was a different intention, there was an awareness. So it comes to the question of saying, did something drastically change in my life? Did something happen? Actually, nothing happened. Very honestly put, there's nothing that really happened. Everything was going all fine. There was no major incident of disturbance that awakened me or that kind of made me question. But I know at some point of time, it started with the idea of saying, why am I doing this? Why am I singing this music? The fact of the matter is, it's great pleasure. I had an audience that understood the music well. I knew the audience well, and we were exchanging something we commonly knew what was going on. But at some point of time, it was like, what is this music all about? Why am I singing this music? And oddly enough, all this for me kind of began with the kind of a question of beauty and aesthetics. It was not a political or social question at all, which is what I'm saying. So, about 2001, I think it was, and I was looking for a composition. I've said this story before, but I'll repeat. I was looking for a composition in the Raga Mangala Keshiki, composed by Muthuswami Dikshita. There was no oral tradition of this song, and I was just looking for a way of accessing it. And my very good friend R.K. Sriram Kumar and he said, okay, let's look at this old book called the Sangeeta Sampradaya Pradarshini, published in 1904 by this incredible musicologist, musician, Subramanian Dikshita. The notations there, let's reconstruct the composition and let's do it. So we did that. For me, that was probably I've seen the treatise before, but not really looked at it seriously. And when we were reconstructing it, that's a magnificent book, because the first time that anybody tried notating Carnatic music, or for that matter, you can say Indian high art as we call it, if I may within quotes, in a kind of a notated form that could describe every movement and every nuance that was there in the music. And but when we are rendering it, when I pick up a notation, I don't look at all those things. I look at the swaras, and I know how it should be sung. Even if it's a new raga, I can pick it up and sing it. So that's what we did. We interpreted it and sang. So in conversation, I said, Sriram, suppose we sing it exactly how it is written over there, how will it sound? So Sriram said, don't ask such questions, let's just first finish this recording. But that question stayed with me, and then there's this fabulous scholar called Dr. R.S. Jayalakshmi. And both of us knew that she had done her PhD on that treatise and on the symbols in the treatise. So we went to her and said, can we try reconstructing this? This was about 2004 or 5, I think. And she said, can we archive it? So that we kind of understand how things have changed. And she said, yeah, let's do it. And we began this whole exercise. Now, when I started this exercise, I think somewhere I started this exercise to kind of reaffirm the glorious tradition of Carnatic music. The glorious beauty that has been there for hundreds of years, and Dikshitar gifted it, and then we carried it forward, we built on the foundation, and there was that reaffirmation somewhere there. And this, of course, all this is post-facto. You're not thinking of all this when you're doing it anyway. So, but the shocker was when we picked up a notation and sang it under her guidance, under Dr. R.S. Jayalakshmi guidance. We looked at the symbols and you sang it and it sounded so bad. It sounded awful to my ear. It was something I couldn't hear. And it was not just a question of patterning, in the sense, I know this raga sounding this way, it sounds this way. No, just the concept of an aesthetic identity like this being called beautiful was unacceptable to me. Now that deeply bothered me. So I'm singing this art form, handed over down by these incredible composers. And I have a certain, can I call it an oral trap of what it should sound like, right? And I'm within that oral trap, and if the trap is removed, suddenly it is not how I want it to sound. So where does beauty come from? Is it contextual to a time period, to a certain cultural basket? And that was the push when I started researching old raga traditions. I was looking at treatises. Still, it was completely a treatise search of saying, can I figure it out? But when you go into that mode, you're not only asking how the music sounds, you're also asking who's singing it, who's listening to it, who's not singing it, who has disappeared, who has appeared, what are the textures that have changed. And therefore, just by totally accidentally, I was asking questions of my own identity. And I think there was a shift in intention there. And there was a huge shift in awareness. I'm not even discussing right or wrong in this, just saying a shift. And the shift completely dislodged every belief system I had, which was not just musical, but about who I was and what I was doing and everything. The moment that started happening, a lot of things collapsed. There was a period, it was very scary. It was a very personal period where it was very scary because all the things that I believed made me, I suddenly felt were totally unnecessary to the idea of what you're doing. And then the question is, what do I have to hold on to? Do I have anything I can hold on to? So there is been this, I think there was this shift, there was this, and I think that's why, to your question that you started about a concept, I think awareness and intention is primal to it. But what happens is a different point. So if I'm singing, what happens that evening is not an accident in that sense. There is an intention to be seated or to place yourself in a certain space with a certain mind of sharing. That intention is very, very, very important. Now, does that expand to the possibility of aesthetics and of something profound? That's completely a different thing. I don't discuss that, but I will discuss the intention of getting into a space where that's a possibility. A possibility is something you intention, you create. It does not happen.
Well, you don't need to discuss it, because I think if it happens, that's obvious. And certainly, I've experienced that many times after many of your concerts. So many questions. So this, well, two things. One is I know you listen very carefully to Kumar Gandharv. You've told me that. And I've often wondered that just like something shifted for Kumarji, he literally lost his lung and stopped singing and went into silence and then re-emerged some years later, and he was completely transformed. And that was a drama of transformation, a narrative of transformation. We've heard it and we know about it now. It's been reconstructed very ably, and I've often wondered, because clearly some turn has occurred for you, and I've often wondered, what that narrative is. So in a sense, you have to some extent hinted at it already in what you just said, with the discovery of the treatises and so on. Although I have sometimes wondered if the break was sharper somehow, or if but if you don't want to talk about it, that's fine.
I'm here to talk.
No, but what I did want you to say more about is that thanks to you, I've come to discover this origin point, in a sense, of the Carnatic tradition as it is established through the Trinity, Muthuswami, Shamasastri and Tyagaraja. And I'm struck by two things, as an outsider, to both music and to the languages in which they're working, not to Sanskrit but certainly to Telugu. One is that the force of what they did can be felt 200 years later. Now, this is not something to discount, right? That it still inspires, motivates, energizes an entire tradition of a silsila of and many different schools, perhaps, of singers, of practitioners, of musicians, of argumentation. You can imagine, I can imagine the kind of tectonic creativity there that produces this kind of a long-term effect. But as you yourself have discovered and have shared then with the rest of us, along with that moment of creation and creativity, there entered historical distortions of various kinds and injustices of various kinds, along the vectors of caste and gender and social class and so on. And also perhaps a fracture that you yourself are clearly struggling with all the time between what we very crudely in modern terms call art and religion, right? So all of this comes with. So the inspiration comes with, the creativity comes with, the force of this explosion of beauty through the three and other composers, lyricists, musicians, thinkers, all of that comes down to us, but then so do these problems, right? And now once you become aware of the problems, it changes for you, as it clearly has, the materials that you deal with on a daily basis. So I know that when you speak about these things, then you are drawing our attention to the problems. But when you sing, you still have to be 100% inside this tradition in order to be able to sing the way you do. How do you manage that conflict?
I actually don't think there's a conflict at all there at some level. Primarily because I think all ideas of beauty have always been constructed with violence within and outside. All ideas of beauty have been constructed with that. because it's the human being who is handling the matter. But that does not discount the profundity of the experience. But we can't use that to discount the violence. Okay? So, therefore, I mean, yeah, I don't know what this is. Let me just finish. So, when I sing Tyagaraja or Dikshitar, first of all, I want to say that every breakaway that people may perceive as breakaway that I've done is actually only because there was a Tyagaraja, Dikshitar or Shama Shastri. Right? If these three people or any of the makers of what we have as music today did not exist, then there's no idea of me breaking away at all or even getting inspired. So what is then the problem? The problem is twofold. One is, how do I access Tyagaraja? Fundamental question. Am I actually accessing Tyagaraja when I sing this composition? That's the first question actually. The first question is, when I sing a Tyagaraja composition or a Dikshitar composition, am I truly accessing the aesthetic grandeur of Tyagaraja, or am I being limited for some reason? Let's not go to history. I mean, no point talking about it now. Is there for some reason I'm unable to access that flow? Or am I saying at times I stumble upon it, the rest I play with the scaffolding that is safe? The question is very simple. For me it was fundamentally, if I strip the scaffolding, is there still a Tyagaraja existent? If Tyagaraja does not exist with the scaffolding, then am I willing to say there's no aesthetic gravitas in Tyagaraja? Of course, my answer to that is the opposite. Of course there is. So when you start stripping this, then comes the problem of Tyagaraja's own political construction or social construction, and that which has been transferred through politics and history of time, right? So how do I negotiate that? That's the question. So it's actually not a conflict, but more being able to live within the experience, yet always being aware that I can't be trapped by that experience. That's the whole point. That I can't be trapped by that experience. I'm always have to be turned around and looking at it again. Which means I'm looking at myself. Actually, when I say I'm looking at Tyagaraja, I'm actually looking at myself. That's what you're doing actually, right? Because you're just mirroring an impression that's carried out to you. So it's so whether it was an aesthetic criticism of Tyagaraja, or shall we say a socio-political questioning of Tyagaraja, it comes with the fact that that question has occurred only because when I sing a Tyagaraja Kirtana, there is something profound happening. And that makes me ask the question of Tyagaraja. So therefore, what I feel is most of the time we are escaping from it. The moment you're escaping from it, then you have to ask, what are you experiencing? We have to ask that question. What are we then experiencing? What are we reiterating? What are we not willing to address? Even in the experience itself. And I really feel one of the reasons there is this shift we talked about at the beginning is that there is something incredibly profound that happens. And here I'm talking about Carnatic, but we can talk about any other art form in its context too. But if that is true, then the question is, how can you be so honest with that truth, but dishonest with everything else that surrounds that? That for me is, at some point, became a bit unacceptable. Just became unacceptable. I'm not saying I found resolution or a thing, but I didn't see it as a conflict. I just saw it as an automatic questioning that has to happen the moment you say, my goodness, there is something happening here. And the moment you acknowledge that, the question has to arise. If the question doesn't arise, then one, either it has not happened, or two, you want to run back to your safety bracket. Only two of these things are possible.
So I think you've said to me a couple of times, maybe more. After you've gone on some crazy tour, you've done 5 concerts in 7 days, you've given lectures, you've spoken, you've written your column, you've had you've had all this hectic activity that, a performer like you has in this day and age. After all is said and done, in words especially, and in the field, let's say, of the political that you have entered so bravely, you have said to me, at least on a couple of occasions, it all comes down to Kamboji. And now it's time to go back to Kamboji, right? So, again, in these readings we were doing over the last month, one of the things we read was the Chandogya Upanishad, and we read this particular conversation between Uddalaka and his son Shvetaketu. And Uddalaka says to Shvetaketu, "Let me tell you about the mind." He said, "The mind is like a bird tied with a string to its perch. And it flies here and there, but in the end it has to come back to the perch. And the bird is the mind, and the perch is the breath, prana, right?" So he says, "Prana bandhanam hi somya mana iti." I think that for you, in some sense, Kamboji is that perch where you return.
Kamboji is empathy.
Okay, tell me about Kamboji.
Kamboji is empathy, because if there is an art experience, the most beautiful thing about an art experience is the idea of empathy. Because empathy means, to me, I would interpret it in this way, is the ability to feel another person, or feel the environment, or feel anything without you having any stake in it. Without you actually being a factor to that experience. So I don't feel empathy, I feel sympathy. Empathy is something that occurs when that element of you being, shall we say, the focus of that emotion dissolves. Isn't that exactly what happens in an art experience? In an art experience, whether it is music, dance, drama, theatre, whatever, when we really are utterly moved by, or, always words are a problem in trying to describe this, but when we are, shall we say, experiencing some kind of an art experience, it's not about you feeling anything, you just feel. Everybody just feels. And so, for me, Todi, Kamboji, Shankaravarnam, Tyagaraja, Dikshidhar, Shamba Shastri have allowed me an entry to that ability to be empathetic. And I think we try to share that. So we are some kind of, I'd like to call ourselves some kind of catalysts of that. As singers, at least, we're just catalysts of that. We provide that avenue, that pathway for that possibility. But essentially, that's what it is. It is empathy. So if I don't realize empathy constantly, then there is no intention. Then there is no question of whether it's the political or the social or whatever. All that comes from me again and again, in a way, keeping myself in that Kamboji, when at some point of time I'm just telling myself, my goodness, this is so damn beautiful. And if this is really so damn beautiful, then how can I not ask questions of all the things that I find vulgar and violent? Whether it's in music or out of the music, it's irrelevant to me. But it's only if I keep dipping myself, for me I'm just talking about myself. For me, that's my station. That's my station. And it's because of empathy. That's the word I'd use.
So that is your perch, where you come back. Speaking of empathy, you've developed a close relationship with Perumal Murugan. And you have been singing. I thought you didn't have a phone.
I think he was doing
Famously doesn't have a phone. You have developed this symbiosis with Perumal Murugan after he was attacked and censored and committed suicide and went into self-imposed exile and so on, where he's been writing poetry, viruttams and kirtanas, which have either addressed the deity of his area, Madhurabhag and Ardhanarishwara, or lately he's written these Panchabhuta kirtanas about the 5 elements. And you have been the voice that has sung or made these poems come out into the world and be shared with everyone. And they are written in contemporary Tamil. They are written in the dialect even, or with the inflections of his part of Tamil Nadu, which is Kongu Nadu. They have the imagery of that area very strongly reflected in the kinds of landscapes he invokes and so on. But they're also the vehicle of his pain, right, which you have empathized with or sympathized with and sounded for the rest of us to relate to in some way. First, briefly tell us a little bit about what it's like working with Perumal Murugan, and then, if you would, please, maybe sing for me the wind song, Katra, which you sing in Nalinakanti. And maybe also the water kirtana, the Neera, right, in Kalyani. If you don't mind.
Yeah. I didn't know Perumal Murugan at all. Before what happened to him when he was attacked in Namakkal. For those who are not aware of what happened to Perumal Murugan is a wonderful author, poet, living in a town called Namakkal. And he wrote this book called Madhurabhagan, which was published about 5 years before all the ruckus in Tamil, and then translated into English and called One Part Woman. And then there was this whole issue where the Gounder caste of people took offense to the book. And yes, extreme right-wingers also got on board. And he was hounded, he was terrorized, he was threatened, name it, it all happened. And it's only at that point of time, honestly, did I become aware of him. So I should first say that it's not like I knew him or I had read him before that. So, and then of course, some of us had got together and kind of rallied around whatever we could. And then he did what I think was the most, of recent past, the most creative way of protesting. His act, I think it was a very creative political act of going on social media and saying the author Perumal Murugan is dead. And in fact I told him this, I said, if you're not with that post, whatever happened? I don't know. So it's an incredibly creative political act that kind of triggered the whole community to come together to, and then went to the court, of course. At that point of time, he had kind of gone into self-imposed exile. And all this happened, and then we happened to meet at a function in Madurai. That's when he came to me and he said, I want to give you something, and he handed over these 44 viruttams. Viruttams are little verses that could be sung in free-flowing ragas. And they're all appeals to Ardhanarishwara Madhurabhagan, and asking him, how can you let these people do this to me? How can you let these awful people do this to me? And, I've done nothing wrong. You're not coming and saving me. you're closing your eyes, you've closed your Garbhagraha to me. How can you just do this? And different ways of expressing great anguish. They're extremely powerful. And when I first read them, I said, my goodness, this must be sung. And that's when I started singing those Virukrams. And then we began this whole conversation. First of all, Perumal Murugan is one of the most wonderful human beings one can meet. He's a person of very few words. He's a very sensitive listener, and he's a very deep man who writes so beautifully because he's quiet. To put it very simply. So then I kind of coaxed him and I said, "Can you write kirtanas?" So he said, "I've only listened to Carnatic music on like YouTube and a few concerts. I don't know much about it." So I said, "No, we'll work on that. Don't worry about that." And so he said, "What do you want me to write about?" I said, "Anything. Absolutely anything." I made only one other request of him. I said, "Can you please use Konganadi dialect?" And there's a reason why I said that. This whole idea of language and issue which I had been raising, the idea of meaning, lyrical meaning was another issue that I was raising and I still raise. I suddenly realized one day that it's not just the meaning of the word, it's also the dialect. For example, if I sang on Rama or Krishna in a dialect that is within quotes subaltern, Rama Krishna transform. Right? So similarly, there are two things. One is thematic, the other is dialect and semantic. So there are two things you play with. One, you play with themes, so you bring in themes that are not common to that cultural, shall we say, basket. But the other thing is you can use themes that the cultural basket is used to, but subvert it by using a semantic and a dialect, that cultural basket. This I stumbled upon in some conversation. So the only thing I said is, if you take Carnatic music, largely, in fact most of Carnatic music, I think most of high art in the world, uses language that is acceptable to the idea of the high people. Right? So through time that may shift. What the high semantic is may shift, but it still remains within that fold. So the only thing I said, bring Kongonadu. For example, there's another composer called Periyasamy Thuran. He comes from Kongonadu, and we sing his compositions. But his Tamil does not reflect the Kongonadu at all. It's the acceptable Tamil that we would sing. So suppose you change that, then the idea of meaning also kind of becomes a grey shade over there. So that's the only thing I requested of him. And then he came back with actually 11 compositions. The first 5 were on the Panchabhuta. And we never discussed themes at all. I just said, write on whatever you want, and just try and bring your environment. It's also interesting that Perumal Murugan as a person is completely outside the whole socio-politics of Carnatic music. He's from an outside world. He's an outsider to Carnatic music, right? As much as I'm outsider to his literary world. It's the same thing.
So, sorry to interrupt for 1 second, but just to clarify, so he was not even aware necessarily of the Panchabhuta kritis that are already sung within the Carnatic tradition.
He was not aware at all. At least that's what I think. Yeah. The funny part is I never discussed that with him. I never told him at any point there is Dikshita's composition Panchabhuta. I don't know why it didn't strike me, but I didn't tell him.
And he came up with his own Panchabhutas.
You know what's most interesting about his Panchabhuta kritis, which I found when I first saw them, is the idea of the Panchabhuta, as real as it is, automatically acquires an esoteric sense. Right? So the tactile material aspect of the Panchabhuta, that it's material. Water is wet, you touch it, you bathe in it, you do all that. That completely disappears from the discourse of the Panchabhuta normally, totally. So it becomes a kind of an esoteric element. So the inwardness of the individual and a kind of inwardness of the water is what is put together, right? So you could have a deity coming in between, being the catalyst for both inwardness, right? In his Panchabhuta, all the 5 elements are tactile, material. They're completely material. He talks about fire, it's material. He talks about water, it's material. And he connects the material to the experience of the material, which is unusual. unusual ideation, very unusual. So when he talks about water as being what it is, he's talking about the emotion of water with the emotion of water as what it is. Lakes, water, lakes, rivers, movement, what you do when you move, what does a storm do, all these things. To me, that was fascinating discourse to have, especially in high art world. Right? It's a very fascinating discourse to have. So that's how we began working. We hope to continue. But there are two other songs in that list which are my favorites. One is called Metangadu Kanjipochu. Metangadu is a classic Konganadu word. So land there where you don't get, which is not irrigated basically, and the farmers only cultivate through rainfall, is Metangadu in Konganadu. And this song is about the suffering of the farmer who has to wait for rain every time to plow the field. The other song is on the palm tree. Of course, palm tree is something is also written about. And the palm tree, for those who don't know, was actually the tree of Tamil Nadu. Everywhere there were palm trees. And the main reason it lost its importance is because toddy disappeared, right? Because for the farmer, planting the palm tree, those little bumps between villages is where they will plant the palm tree. And in Konganadu, that's called itteri. So he says, itteri mele ekantamai nindrirukkum paniye. He says, the panamaram, the palm tree, is standing on that little hump in solitude. And finally, when I heard that song, it reminded me of another Carnatic song. And that song was Orangasai of Tyagaraja. So it is my cultural habituation. The idea of Ekanta immediately connected me to Vishnu lying flat in Srirangam. That's the truth. And I coaxed my friend to tune it in Kambuji.
What is this? Toddy to toddy.
Sorry? That's for people like you who are on Twitter always, not for us. So,
On the wind.
probably not sing the whole thing, I'll just sing parts.
Sure.
Just give me a second.
I actually don't know any Tamil, so I had a common friend of ours and a student of sorts of Krishna's tell me what each of these means. I can share that with you perhaps.
எங்கும் புகுந்து எதிலும் நுழைந்து எங்கும் புகுந்து எதிலும் நுழைந்து ஆங்காரமீட்டு வருவாய் எங்கும் புகுந்து எதிலும் நுழைந்து ஆங்காரமீட்டு வருவாய் தங்களின்றி தரணியதும் சூற்றி ஓடும் காற்று நீ எங்கும் புகுந்து எதிலும் நுழைந்து ஆங்காரமீட்டு வருவாய் தங்களின்றி தரணியதும் சூற்றி ஓடும் காற்று நீ எங்கும் புகுந்து அங்கம் தழுவிட உனக்கிங்கு அங்கம் தழுவிட உனக்கிங்கு தடையதும் கிடையாது அங்கம் தழுவிட உனக்கிங்கு விடகிட்டு உன்னை வசப்படுத்த முடியாது. எங்கும் புகுந்து எதிலும் நுழைந்து அங்கார மீட்டு வருவதாய் எங்கும் பெரும் புயல் வடிவெடுத்து எல்லைகள் அழித்திடுவாய். பெரும் புயல் வடிவெடுத்து எல்லைகள் அழித்திடுவாய். அருஞ்சமர் புரியுமோரக்கனாய் சூழ்ந்திடுவாய். தரும் மூச்சு நீரத்தி தகைமையை காற்றிடுவாய். தரும் மூச்சு நீரத்தி தகைமையை காற்றிடுவாய். காற்றிடுவாய். முருகவனருயிரெல்லாம் உன்வசம் மானதன்றோ. முருகவனருயிரெல்லாம் உன்வசம் மானதன்றோ. எங்கும் புகுந்து எதிலும் நுழைந்து அங்காரமீட்டு வருவாய். தங்களின்றி தரணியகும் சூற்றி ஓடும் காற்று நீ எங்கும் புகுந்து எதிலும் நுழைந்து
You did sing the whole thing.
Yeah.
Do you want me to tell you what it means? Or is everyone here able to follow? Just like I'm able to follow by sheer force of will. Well, I have, Krishna, you'll correct me. This is Veron's translation, okay? This is a very young girl, Veronica, who has sent me these translations. You enter everything, this is addressed to the wind. You penetrate everything, you enter with a violent force, blowing without rest, you travel across the earth. You have no barriers should you want to caress the various parts of the body. No one can chain you, no one can control you. You blow without rest, you travel across the earth.
Just read that.
You wipe away all boundaries, you take the form of a storm, you whirl like a demon fighting a great battle, you show your
take
power.
the form of the storm to wipe all boundaries.
Okay. And then you show your power by stopping our breath. Isn't everyone's life under your control?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay, I just skipped the first charanam. Thanks for singing that. Oh gosh. So you talked about language. And it's funny, I mean, first of all, you know, despite not understanding Tamil or Telugu, you know, I've been making this journey with you. But I do understand the Sanskrit that you sing, and you sing a lot of Sanskrit. And you know, something in what you're singing and the way you sing makes me want to discount our contemporary politics of language, where we're always going on about Hindi and Tamil and the imposition of this and the hegemony of that. One of the things I learned with a shock. I mean, I actually studied Sanskrit for many years, but it's in hearing you sing it that it struck me. First of all, that in no way, shape or form is this a dead language, or ever was. But also that primarily, I think, now, this is my theory, unsubstantiated by any linguistics, by the way, is that Sanskrit was meant always already to be sung. And that there is a way in which it lives in the singing that cannot be exterminated through other kinds of historical factors. There's something intrinsically musical in it, which I only heard when you sang it.
I'm not so convinced that it's only about Sanskrit, that it's entirely internally
But this
musical.
may be true. This may be true of the other languages you sing as well.
No, I think every language is aesthetically a musical idea. Aesthetically a musical idea, because language is born from sound, and from sound and impression of sound is born meaning. And from impression of sound, when meaning is born, it constructs itself into consonants and vowels and accents and dialects. So the idea of the word, in its primal form, is sound. And I think the greatest disservice we do with language is we forget that primarily, in its primal form, language is a sonic aesthetic extravaganza. I think that's what we forget, because all these partitions of Hindi, Tamil comes entirely from the idea of the semantic, which is so intrinsically grounded in the politics and in the social, whatever, history. Because the moment I say meaning, then I am saying meaning, right? And that constructs everything with it, right or wrong, it does. So, while I agree with you that Sanskrit is musical, I think it's your cultural inhabitation that makes your connectivity with Sanskrit natural.
Hard one, my friend. I mean, 12 years of graduate school actually, but anyway. No, but I'm questioning this natural versus Samskrita distinction, in fact. Which is the way definition of Sanskrit, right? That it's constructed. It's not natural. It's not organic. It's not a spoken language. It's not even a living language, right? But when you sing it, all of that melts away, and it becomes this aesthetic, sonic extravaganza, right? Which is actually a good description of you, I would say. But just to stay for a second with the Sanskrit. Not because I'm trying to be a cultural hegemon or anything.
You sound close to that.
Oh, come down. You just sang us this gorgeous Tamil and we all sat and listened politely.
But go ahead, you're allowed to be.
Yo, 1 second. You discovered. What? You discovered. Hello. Why are you making fun of me? These Notuswara Sahityas, right?
I think they were already there.
They were already there, right? And you tuned them and you...
No, I didn't tune them.
Had them sung.
Some of them the melody was available.
Right. Okay.
Some I had to construct.
You had to construct. So it's interesting. They're written in Sanskrit, right? They take Western tunes and notations and notes and set the Sanskrit lyrics to these Western notations, right? And you, in a sense, revived them at the very least, if you didn't discover them.
I brought them together.
You brought them together, you published the text, you had these kids sing them, right? And there's a marriage of East and West, but it's also happening in the 19th century, 18th century.
Probably 18th, 19th.
Late 18th, early 19th century. So the composer Dikshitar is exposed to European music or British and Scottish and Irish tunes, right? Apart from his whole compositional oeuvre, he also has this little thing going on the side, right, where he's singing.
I don't think it's probably the right way to describe it, actually.
Right. But so tell us. I mean, and they're charming. I mean, thanks to you, I listen to them all the time. They're easy to sing along. You don't have to know any Carnatic music. A little bit of Sanskrit, very easy for children. Absolutely. For children, right? So what is happening there? I mean, is he domesticating Western music? Is he infantilizing Sanskrit? What is he doing? And why is it so pleasing to the ear, actually?
Oh, you asked actually 3 questions. The pleasing part will come to the end.
That's my revenge.
I thought, we really don't know what is going on. But there's one thing about Dikshita's life, which is slightly different to an extent from, say, Tyagaraja's life or Shyama Shastri's life. His life allowed him for more, shall we say, a wider experience of society than Tyagaraja's. We can definitely say that. Okay. Tyagaraja and Diksha and Shyama Shastri, to put it in very South Indian terms, were people of the Agrahara. Mm-hmm. Okay? Though Tyagaraja traveled, he traveled to another Agrahara. Right? So that's what he did. But Dikshita is very interesting. First of all, Dikshita's family was very connected. For those who don't know what Agrahara, it's the Brahmin enclave around temples, where the inner circle around the temple. So Dikshita is interesting. His life is interesting because his family was traditionally involved and had an association with the Devadasis and with the Nadaswaram players of the temple. So naturally there was a greater interaction with, shall we say, some community beyond, shall we say, the Brahmin fold than Tyagaraja had or Shyama Shastri had. Shyama Shastri was, his family were the priests of a temple in Tanjore. So therefore there was, and also what happened is they came to then Madras on an invitation of a Mudaliyar, stayed in Madras for many years, and that's where he's exposed to what is actually band music. That's what it is actually, right? So Irish folk tunes from these bands played. So on an aside, there is still a police band, there is still in India, in Chennai, and I've actually got their notations to see if any of these songs were there. They were not there, but they still play very much similar same tunes and same music. They have not changed in any fashion, the police or the army band of Chennai. But so he's exposed to that. So I think even as a person, and you had his brother who learned to play the violin, say an association with the Sadir, with the idea of the visual, what the idea of visual aesthetic is, and they composed for Sadir. So the whole gamut of social interaction and cultural, shall we say, osmosis is definitely greater in Dikshita's life than in Tyagaraja's life. This is a context of their living. And I think this is what made him kind of experiment in a different way. Tyagaraja has done his own in a very different sense, but still within socially the same basket. So, but I think that's why you probably had this man trying his hand with these tunes. What's fascinating about these tunes is, so I found, the first time you find these tunes mentioned, by the way, is in a 1837 notebook where you have this person writing about how these Notaswaras are there and what are the parallel folk tunes for them. So in that I don't remember now, about 12 or 13 parallel folk tunes for 9 of them. And the rest was also published in the Sampradaya Pradarshini, the Prathama Abhyasa Pustakam actually, in early 20th century. So you look at these compositions. There are 2-3 fascinating things. One is, if you actually showed this to somebody who doesn't understand it's a folk tune or something, they'll actually think that the tune and the words are put by Dikshita. They'll actually think Dikshita wrote both the music, and it just sounds very real that it's come together. The kind of coming together that happens with the melody and the Sahitya is quite incredible in all those Notaswarams. Secondly, he's also played with the primary melody in order to accommodate his interpretation of Sahitya. So some of them, the melody is not intact. Okay? There are deviations that he's taken, and you can imagine that some of these folk tunes are played with harmonies, right? So what he does, he picks the primary melody out and uses that, and then he also plays around with it to accommodate his interpretation. So why did he compose this? I don't know whether it was just one of those fun things that he did. I don't think there was such consciousness of that. But obviously, the music played for the band found him interested. Probably his brother played a few of those tunes. We don't know that. But I think the fascinating aspect is that there's no judgment of East or West here.
Right.
At least from our perception today.
Right.
We know that he did not compose this in order to sing it in front of any British officer. That we know. Okay?
But
To some extent we know.
why
So it was not done for that purpose.
Why is there a homogeneity in the raga?
Basically that's the primary melodies. No? The primary folk tune melodies
Right.
all have very similar things. By the way, he's not the only person who's done Lotuswarams.
Okay.
You go to the Mysore court. The Mysore court, which is incredibly influenced by British
Sure.
the French also to some extent. The king was very interested in Western music. You have a lot of Lotuswarams coming out of the Mysore court. Probably later period, not during Dikshita's time. But this whole idea of trying to find some kind of a connection, I think has been around there in a few of these places. But primary purpose of Dikshita's endeavor, I have no clue. Of course, in the Pratama Abhyasa Pustakamu is a giveaway, means for learning children to learn, is where Subbarama Dikshita has published this.
Right.
He's published 20 out of them. So by the early 20th century, it came to be established that this is for kids learning this music. So how did that happen? We don't know.
Right.
We don't know when that happened, that they decided that these songs could be taught to young children. I don't know, we don't know when that happened.
I suspect that they can both learn how to sing and learn Sanskrit. Because it's so simple and effective, you know, it's just
Possible. We don't know.
anyway. Okay, I don't know if many of you know, but Krishna in the last 4 or 5 years, I would say 3, 4 years, 5 years, has become very serious mountain climber. I don't just mean that he goes on long walks up the hill, but a trekker, a mountaineer. A friend was saying to me that this is probably a way to build capacity, build endurance. I don't know. We'll ask you about that. So in 4 years, you've climbed 5 mountains around the world, something like that, including just a couple of weeks ago, a month and a half ago. Yeah. So in Hindi we say, much maligned, कि भालू चढ़ा पहाड़ पर देखे क्या वहाँ सिवा पहाड़ के था ही क्या वहाँ
I climb, I can tell you no Balu will be there.
No, but you climbed, right? Right. So what happened?
I tend to deflect.
That's my mom. It's okay. So yeah. So no, tell me. You know, where do you climb?
Where? Why?
Why?
Why? Oh.
That's my penultimate question.
Okay. Well, I used to trek when I was much younger in school, just out of school. Then for about 10 years, I did not have much physical activity. You just need to get to YouTube and see some of my videos of 2004, and it's quite awful actually. But then I started to trek again, and I don't usually trek or climb in huge groups. It's not like 20 or 30 of us, but 2 or 3 of us, sometimes max 5 or 6. And I don't know what it is. It's then I went back to the mountains in 2009, I think, when we went on a trek to Nanda Devi base camp, or 9 or 8, 9 maybe. And it was after years that I went back to the mountains. And when I went back to the mountains, it was just something. It was exactly like Kamboji. To put it very simply, it was exactly like singing. It was like there was something very, very important that you felt, and that's when I said I should just keep coming as much as I can. Then I got into high altitude climbing. That was because a friend of mine said, why don't you try climbing? And I started then climbing mountains. And that, of course, is a different thing from trekking, but nevertheless, it's keeps you alone, completely alone. The idea of darkness changes. The idea of light changes. The idea of what you see, what you don't see changes. The idea of what your body can do and cannot do changes. I think one thing that I find similar to all the rest that is happening in my life and climbing is actually discomfort. I just found that the more I put myself in positions of great discomfort, physically, emotionally, spatially, there is more I realize about my own limitations. And I think at some level, I think climbing does exactly the same thing to me. It puts you in great discomfort, not just physically, also mentally. At 4 o'clock in the morning, at 17,000 feet, roped, and there's no sun, it's minus 20, of course you're deadbeat, but also mentally you're exhausted. You have no energy for anything, and all the craziest of thoughts, oxygen drops, so your mind's wandering, and it's kind of a discomfort that also gives you clarity of what is there, and what you can do, what's possible. And I see that very similar to all the other things I dabble with in life. And maybe, in a way, that's something that I seek out every year. And that's why every year I go away for 15 days. Maybe it is, I don't know. I mean, I'm just trying to find reasons. I don't know. Maybe that's the reason. But I know that that's my connection to it. And it's not, and when the light comes out at 4:45 in the morning on a mountain, not the sun, just the light. And it's something else. It's just something else. And like I said, you would sing. You would sing. And, I do sing on every mountain. Actually, every mountain I sing. So it's a very personal thing. Climbing for me is very, very personal. It's as personal as singing, or as personal as speaking, or as personal as writing, or whatever. So actually, it's all the while trying to figure out how much you can move yourself. How much can you move yourself? And not that you find answers in it, but the process has to be constant. And I think climbing for me is an extension of exactly the same process. I don't think there's any difference.
I have a last question, although I feel like it's, I don't know, it's redundant in some sense, but since I thought I'll ask it. And then we'll open up the floor. So I asked you why you climb, and I'm going to ask you why you sing.
I can give you the cliche. I don't have an answer. Well, there is a song. I don't know.
You want to sing it?
No, I really know. I said that my answer was there is a song.
But you want to sing that song?
I don't know. I really don't have an answer to this. The practicality of why it is. But how can I not sing?
So will you sing?
We can do that another day.
What a song.
Okay, please.
Yes, Madam.
Languages, Krishna. Are you a different singer in each of them?
Wow, very good question. Okay, it's actually far more nuanced than that. I don't think so. That's a primary answer. But let's complicate my own answer. There's also the fact of understanding, right? And I believe very strongly that in art music, which is what I inhabit, semantic understanding is not necessary. This is my point I've made multiple times, but it has many nuances and complications in that statement, so that we can't go through now. So therefore, sometimes what happens, there is this dual thing that happens to me. So I understand Tamil, right? So while I'm saying art music is completely abstract, I also have the literal semantic coming and hitting me because I understand. So you're kind of trying to straddle that, right? But it's also true, I can tell you, that those who say, no, I don't care about meaning, I listen to Telugu composition, there's a bit of a, if I may say, a fraud in that. Tell you why. Even if you don't understand Telugu or Sanskrit, in our cultural inhabitation, we understand trigger words. So if a word Padmam comes there, everybody knows what it means. If the word Kamakshi comes there, everybody knows. They don't have to understand the rest of the composition in Tyagaraja Kirtana. Rama comes 4 times. So in a way, you already entered the emotion of Tyagaraja with that one word, right? So why I said this is because many times we say we don't care about the meaning. We listen to Telugu people listen to them. No, if I compose a song in Telugu that was about a dog, there will be no emotional connection for us. So my point here is, I'm not a different singer in every language. I do struggle with the similar literal, non-literal, abstract ideas in all the languages. And therefore, you're constantly trying to negotiate that. At least I am. For me, it's very important, so I am. And therefore, more or less the same person. More or less the same person. Yeah.
But when you're singing a raga and there is no...
Let's actually think about that. If I had decided the composition before I sang the alapana.
But sometimes...
No, talking about me or a general observation?
No, you.
Okay. Now I'll come to me first. But I just want to first say even about the alapana, because we presume that in the alapana there is no lyrics, therefore there can be no direct bhakti of sorts. That doesn't actually work. No, I want to address that. What actually doesn't work that way, because if I've decided a composition and I'm framing an alapana, then if I'm emotionally bound by the semantic of the composition, that seeps automatically into the alapana also. Okay? Now talking about me personally, I usually treat a kirtan and alapana in exactly the same way for me. Both are bodies of sound. Okay? In an alapana, like you said, there is no lyrics at all. Therefore, there is no question of a challenge being thrown to my abstraction. Right? Whereas in a kirtana, because there is sahitya, there is a challenge. You could ask another question. Suppose a composition without sahitya but text, a tillana. It has text, but it has no text that has meaning. So there is also a shift in that, between singing a text that has meaning and does not have meaning. Furthermore, you take a...
Do a Tamil, for instance.
Yeah. So I'm saying there is no meaning. So there is no problem there of the text. But even within the text, there are many shades. The text in a varnam, where actually you never hear the word, you hear only syllables. Right? You don't hear the words. Whereas in a kirtana, you actually hear the words as in word form. So even there are different kinds of abstractive and literal negotiations. In an alapana, if I just sing an alapana as a free-flowing. No, that happens not always. It's not a decision I made when I started an alapana, that it's going to be standalone. The alapana has to grow into, shall we say, a self-complete body of that raga. When that happens, is only then I say, I'm done here. Sometimes it leads itself to a composition. It can lead itself to something else. So, in a non-semantic rendition, yes, it's more a direct abstract connection.
Of course, this is my opinion.
You're holding your mic on the opposite side.
This is my opinion. I've always felt that when you are just singing a raga, abstract, there is a sense of ecstasy in you, which is much above what it is when the word is also there. That's my impression. I may be totally wrong.
I'm no one to judge. Nobody can be right or wrong in this. It's an impression, right? But I'm going to just wonder, maybe you are able to experience greater ecstasy when there is no word compared to when there is word. That's also a possibility. That the alapna somehow allows you to transcend the word. I'm not saying that, I'm not judging what you said of me. I'm not judging it at all. Just wondering whether the flip also is also applicable, right? That somewhere in an alapna, because it's just abstract, there is some other kind of ecstasy that you're able to connect with me, or with the raga, whatever. That the same thing does not happen when it comes into kirtan. That's also possible.
So though I understand that every artist has his own creative process, could you probably shed light on the importance of silence and the inwardness associated with it for the creative process of a musician? Because Mauna at times can be very profound. For example, Kumar Gandhar's example. When Kumar Gandhar spent a lot of time in illness, he, was bedridden for quite some time, and it is then that he took in the folk tunes of Madhya Pradesh. So maybe that process we could throw some light on it.
There's one that you should not shed light on at some level. Just wonder whether at some level you can't shed light on that at some level. But let me try. Silence is probably the most active idea. It's a very active idea. So the idea of silence has got nothing to do with whether you're singing then or no, or not. Right? So silence is when there is a certain complete openness that's there. So silence can happen during a lecture. Silence can happen while you're singing. Silence can happen when you're doing nothing too. So we have to think about Kumarji there a bit. He couldn't sing. Does not mean he did not sing. Right? Because there is this presumption when you construct that somehow Kumarji did not sing for so many years. That's for me somehow problematic. The only reason he came back singing is because he was always singing. And it is in the singing that there was the silence. It was not about a man lying in bed quietly, not really singing in that sense for so many years, and then everything was internalized. No. So the thing about silence is because it's active, it means it in fact implores us to continue singing, to continue speaking, to continue writing, to continue doing whatever we do. Right? It's only if that is a continuous process in the way we do whatever we do, or make art in this case, is that really something of value. Doing meditation every morning for half an hour is going to do nothing to you if you cannot find silence when you're not doing meditation, right? Right? You may feel much better. I'm not going to argue. I can't judge that. I'm not going to judge it. You may feel better. That's your thing. But if you're really talking about silence as a creative idea, that's what we're talking about. Then it's a completely different thing. I can tell you one thing. I can tell you what I do before I sing. Right? So whether it's singing in the concert hall, whether it's singing at home, it doesn't make a difference at some level. So, like initially when she said about intention, I can just tell you about that idea. So there was a time when I thought that everything just happens accidentally. If something happens that day, it happens. If it doesn't, then I'm convinced that this accidental thing is not necessarily true. There is a process that can make that a possibility, like I said. So for me, it's very simple, very tactile, practical things. Starting from tuning the tambura. Very simple thing. It's about sitting and tuning the tambura. And in the process, of tuning the tambura, in the process of the way you're seated, in the process of just creating actual physical space. See, actually when you sit, you're creating physical space as much as you're creating kind of an acoustic space. So creating that physical space, creating the acoustic space by tuning the tambura, if I can be active and alive in that whole process, then silence is a possibility. Otherwise, silence is an accident. I prefer it being a possibility.
I have, with your permission, one quick question and one main question.
Speak to the microphone, please.
The quick question was, you had mentioned earlier about coming from privilege of various kinds, and at one point you mentioned a privilege of aesthetics as well. Did you mean aesthetics musically, or I didn't know how you meant it? And my main question was in answer to the question of how you're able to practice your art despite knowing a few things, and despite the various nuances that you have gone into and the depth and the conflict that you have gone through. Isn't a part of the answer, I wonder, the fact that Carnatic music does come from a very universalist system of music, is that not part of the answer? I'm not getting into Carnatic music, is very scientific, I'm not going there. But my question is...
I would run for my life if you'd gone there.
Yeah. But my question is, it is based on absolute basics, isn't it? Isn't there a universality of music that goes beyond the genre of the music you're singing now?
I really don't understand what you mean by that, actually.
No,
I seriously don't understand. I'm not trying to,
No, I understand.
I'm not trying to
But I mean
trivialize what you said. I really don't understand.
Of course. One last minute, sorry to take your time. What I mean by that only is that at the end of the day, it's still just music, isn't it? Even though there is a political connotation to it, yes.
Okay. Yeah. So, the all music is music kind of thing, right?
Sort of based on the same
Premise. Okay. The first question was, sorry, I'm not lost.
privilege.
Privilege. So I said, I was careful when I said that. I said maybe very carefully because I wanted to make sure that I don't get that wrong. So it's kind of a dangerous statement to make. When I said aesthetic privilege, I meant aesthetic privilege in connection with Carnatic music. Because if I say aesthetic privilege, I'm not judging other aesthetics when I say that. Okay? So I had the privilege to have the access and to have contact and to have the ability to listen to Carnatic music. So that was the privilege to enter this aesthetic realm is all I'm talking about. Because if I say anything else, I find it problematic myself. Because I'm creating a hierarchy in aesthetics the moment I say this is privileged aesthetics compared to something else. That I don't think I think it's incorrect basically. Okay. Now to your second question, this universality of music is kind of or art itself. People also throw this, right? I think that's I don't entirely agree with that. I think music or any kind of art forms, every art form or different kinds of music, the magnificence of that is the human mind. Because the human mind has kind of figured that there are different emotive experiences that the human being has. And there are different emotional quadrants, if you want to put it that way, in some sense, right? And each art form, because of its intention, kind of keeps tapping on different things. There will be overlaps, of course, but taps on different things, which is why, for example, political music, directly political music, taps on something, a political consciousness, a social context, which is completely, mainly on the lyrical front, but uses music as a package. So each form, in a way, celebrates a different emotionality of human beings. And therefore, this universality of music, if you, as a person who's analyzing the idea, I don't think it's correct. But you could say, you could always turn down and say, for me, I feel this and this is the same. I will not argue with that. But as an objective discussion, I will say that doesn't work for me. But for you, if some two things conflict, it's very possible because we are all human beings and we will match patterns. You will match patterns and I'll match patterns.
Good evening, sir. Sir, in your talk you spoke about the Panchabhuta Kritis, and the Panchabhuta Kritis, as you mentioned, they don't just deal with 5 shrines of Shiva, but they have a deeper esoteric meaning associated with them. So South India is generally associated with several temple collectives which are generally clubbed together and associated, as in you have the 5 sabhas where Shiva is supposed to have performed his dance and all of that. So apart from the Panchabhuta Kritis, are there other compositions which are associated with a certain collective group of temples, and are there certain esoteric nuances associated with these collectives as well? Could you throw light on
Well, there are many collective Kavalamba, Navavarnams. There is many compositions. That is the Varakritis of Dikshita. The person who's done a lot of these kind of esoteric kind of compositions is Dikshita, Muthuswami Dikshita. There are many collectives like this. Many that have been brought together. Nilo Palamba series, there is Kamalamba series, there is Varakirtana series, there is Abhyamba series. There are many. And it's mainly Dikshita who has actually put them together to some extent. There are many.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can hear you.
So you talked about incorporating dialects.
Just a minute.
Yeah. So you talked about incorporating dialects instead of what you call as classical language like Sanskrit, right? So to be more appropriate, non-standardized languages. So I was wondering what made you take that step, because clearly you had to break the privileges, the socio-cultural conditioning in which you were brought up. And also you had to break the prevalent notion that a particular language can be more superior than the other. Right. So I was wondering, how did you break these prevalent notions, and what made you, the urge to take such a sensible step, I would say, so that you
Thank you very much for that. Thank you. I'm glad you think it's sensible. But
it is.
Because I've heard most people say it's totally stupid. So I'm glad I have one support.
Because clearly no language is superior to another or inferior to the other. So it's just a very sensible step to incorporate dialects into such a formal Carnatic compositions. So it must have been a hard step. So I was wondering what made you take that step.
Actually, it was not very hard in terms of my own sense of sociopolitics. It was not hard. It was hard in the sense of an aesthetic question, because I'm not sure of what I was doing. Okay. As much as I can believe, I can say politically, I can say it makes complete sense that any dialect should be sung in Carnatic music. Now, but aesthetically, will any dialect fit with the idea of a raga in Carnatic music? Something I don't know until I've actually grappled with it. So for me, initially it made all political sense, but I was nervous about that. I was like saying, will this work? Because sometimes it may not work. And then I must be willing to say, even after taking a stance like that, I'm sorry, I can't use Chennai Tamil in Carnatic music. Right? So that was actually a big battle for me. Because I kind of committed to the idea, but I didn't know what was going to come out of the idea. Right? So, can I give you a slightly long-winded answer? Okay. So, it's very odd how this happened. And again, all these things, I think most of the time you're processing post, because when you're doing it, I'm a kind of person who just does. And I just do. And then you're processing on why this is happening. So I have this whole question of, abstraction in language. The idea that language is a sonic body, which we discussed. It's been my philosophical position for a long time. And I kept trying to communicate this idea. And I realized that it's very hard to communicate this idea because we're so entrenched in meaning. So how do I make somebody understand that in art music or in this form, we have to transcend it? So I struggled with it. I struggled with finding ways to communicate it. And in my book, I put a question mark on one line, which was, I asked the question, is the way to go about it to bring other themes into Carnatic music? And I said, but I'm afraid of doing that, or suggesting it, because instead of Rama being an obsession, tomorrow a dining table can become an obsession. You know what I mean? That you can obsess with some of the semantic idea. So I left it there. But I moved from that position. So I'm here talking abstract, and there is one other extreme, somebody who says, no, the idea of bhava is sahitya bhava. And if you sing a kirtana, sahitya bhava, I must feel. On an aside, nobody says that when they sing very erotic compositions. They usually say it only when they sing very bhakti-ful compositions. I'm not having anybody say, I want to know the meaning of every padam you sing, I really want to know what's happening there. Nobody comes and begs that of us. But anyway, that's an aside. That's just a joke. But so then I said, okay, suppose that you can call that experience of thing profound, divine, or whatever. So I said, is it possible to create different divinities or multiple divinities, multiple profoundnesses? So I said, one way is if I bring other themes. And if an individual who believes greatly in Sahitya Bhava, or me feeling Rama when I sing Rama, says that I felt exactly the same ecstasy, as you put it, when you sang on the palm tree as Rama, there's an interesting semantic shift that is happening. Right? So this is how I started singing a song on Allah. Okay? Then this is the realm I was operating in, and still slowly trying to find compositions that I could tune and put it in. Then it struck me that it's not just meaning, it's also dialect. That there is another way of creating different profundities, is if the language is what you could call everyday person's language on the street, which you can't imagine as being married to something that is so divine as the ideas of classical art forms, then if you can bring that together and in some way evoke a similar profundity, then people start thinking in shades. Then the shade can move to possible abstraction. So in a very odd way, I've used literal semantics to somehow get people to an idea of abstraction. So I've used the literal semantic of the palm tree meaning of the song on Allah, which is literal semantic, to say you can is possibility of transcending that. So it's a kind of a mechanism actually, probably hope too, right, at some level. So that's how, and the Porambottu song, which is a song we sang, which is using Chennai Tamil, was just something we tried and we hoped it worked. That's all. We didn't know it will work or not. When the song first came, I just said it's beautiful, and we'll have to sit and see if it will work. It worked, and now I've told my friend I want a few more songs on whatever themes you think of. So today in a concert, when I sing Porambottu exists with Tyagaraja and Dikshithar, it's a fascinating idea, right? So how can Porambottu exist with Tyagaraja on the same stage? It does a lot of interesting inversions in our own imageries. And I think the more we can create a little subversions of sorts, then the way we receive also becomes more vulnerable. I think the essential thing is to be vulnerable, right? And sometimes you have to curate a situation that makes somebody vulnerable, including yourself. All this while I'm also talking about myself, by the way. So can I curate a situation, not vulnerable, situation where I'm vulnerable, or where somebody else is?
By the way, this Porambottu song, which has gone viral, right, and which everybody now knows about, even if they know nothing about Carnatic music. I only understood quite recently, I was telling you this, that the radical move in opening it with the word Porambottu, which means waste or trash or garbage or useless or whatever. In Anand Bhairavi, right? Because you have all this lead up and you could well be about to sing O Jagadamba, right? And the first word you utter is Porambottu. And I mean that even what you're doing there in the music and head-on collision with the language in a sense, right?
Yeah, because
and still it's Carnatic, right? And it works.
Yeah, because it's fundamentally an abuse word. To anybody.
Yeah.
So it creates an interesting conflation of sorts, and that's what you hope to do by that. We hope that's why when we tuned it, I remember sitting and just choosing ragas with my friend who tuned it actually.
Yeah.
And we just went back and forth, Sriram Kumar, and he said he started singing Ananda Bhairavi, and I said second is Begada. And then he sang Begada, and then he chose the third. We kept flipping the
six, right?
6 ragas. We kept choosing ragas alternatively. Mm-hmm. And I remember when I said, one of the ragas, and that is Devagandhari. When I said Devagandhari, Sriram stopped and looked at him and said, in Tamil, he said, Devagandhari. Because Devagandhari is this very, considered a very pristine old raga, and that you don't generally play around with, right? So he said, I said, yeah, just give it a shot, let's see what happens. And of course he sang it beautifully first off, and I said, that's it, this is it. And there was a conscious intention in my head when it was being tuned that the ragas chosen must be what is perceived within quotes as being hardcore, authentic Carnatic ragas. And that was in my head. That was not something that happened accidentally. I had that in my head. That if this should work, it should work with what is considered pristine and pure within this construction. And then it makes sense. Okay, so but we also have Sindhuvari, but nevertheless we use a lot of these ragas.
And what's so interesting is that, of course, the song is composed or tuned by R.K. Sri Ram Kumar, the violinist. And I remember the first time I spoke to him on Elliot's Beach, actually, he said, after concert you had there in the open, he said, I am a Smarta, we are very religious. So it's not only the purity of the music, but also that he's really coming from a very different place, socially, culturally, and yet the simpatico between you and him, I mean, it's an extraordinary partnership, and the music makes all of that less relevant.
Yeah,
right?
But it also does something interesting, right? It makes our own perception of a person who comes from a conservative environment question that also, right? Because if anybody saw Sri Ram, in fact, many people who saw Sri Ram said, when they said Sri Ram Kumar composed, they were in shock actually. It's like, I mean, this guy looks as conservative as you can in terms of the religious sense. So, in a way, you are also inverting that imagery. That you presume that you look at a person with a lot of, vibhuti in his head and he seems very religious. Somehow you think the person is not capable of something. You feel the person is boxed in this antiquity and therefore is not sensitive enough to society or people. We do the so-called liberals do exactly that. And there has to be some amount of consciousness of that too. So, I can tell you that asking Sri Ram to tune it was also completely political strategy. There was no accident. Because if I had tuned it, no big deal. He's up to these things, he's going to do another thing. Okay? Right. But and the point is that Sri Ram and I are great friends. Right. Because at one level we're very similar people, as crazy it may sound. But we're actually very similar people. We disagree on many things, but we're very similar people. And so for me, asking him to tune this was also part of saying, it questions that too, at some level, right? For the inner circle at least. The rest don't know, but at least the inner circle, says, if I suddenly find there's a guy who tunes the lyrics of the Sringeri, pontiff, he also tunes a Porumboku song. Now, that's an interesting perception to play with. So you're just playing with that.
In fact, he said to me, I have to go because I have to go to our temple. And I said, how is Krishna the closest person to you? And he just smiled at me. And lately you gave another concert and I wanted to write about it. But I wanted to check, for me it's like a big exercise to figure out which raga, what the song is actually. It takes me hours and hours because I don't understand the language. So I wrote him and I said, I think he sang, and I gave him a list and he wrote me back and he said, I am very happy. This shows what sincere listening can teach a person about Carnatic music. Well done. You're right on each one, right? But I just really appreciated that that the most radical move, as you're saying, came from one who appears to be the most traditional, conservative, etc., puritanical almost.
I think we've through the various things we've done, we've encountered that many times.
Yeah.
Where I look at myself and said, I had judged this person so easily. Because I look at myself as being this open, liberal person who's questioning everything, and I go to this kind of, say, a very upper caste kind of gathering, and I've actually already judged the people sitting there. I've already presumed so many things about them. That's as unfair as anything else, I think. And sometimes I think I also feel that, yeah, there's a lot of awful things, but sometimes you just need a pathway for things to happen. It's just that there's no pathway, there's no catalyst, there's no way to create the bridge, so these things don't happen. If there's somebody to create the bridge, then the interesting things can happen, interesting movements can happen, whether it's musically or otherwise.
Right. So we have...
There was a question about somebody, yeah, this girl, yeah.
I don't have a mic, so I'll try
Just go ahead.
So I come from Tirupati, sir. So this is a small little...
I don't think Tirupati needs an introduction. I'll be shocked that Tirupati needs an introduction.
No, people immediately say Balaji or Laddu. That's those two things. It's important because I've grown up listening to two languages, Tamil and Telugu. And that's the interesting thing about living on the border areas. From a very young age, you have access to the idiom of the other language that is not spoken at home. So I spoke Telugu at home, but Tamil was always there. So in that sense, because you practice your art in two languages majorly, you embody borders in that sense. So my question is this. You were answering her, and I thought that was very interesting what you said about how she makes the art what it is. So about reception then, how do you perceive a difference in the reception, say if in front of Telugu people and in front of a Tamil audience? Does something change? Do people come and tell you different things? Because when I grew up learning Carnatic music in Telugu, we were always told about how Tamil people have taken the Telugu language, the songs in Telugu, and we were told that. I don't agree to it or anything, but this is what we always heard. Look at the Tamils; they are so proud of language, and Telugu people really they don't care about their musical tradition as much. So, is there a difference in the reception of these things?
I really don't think there is. Primarily because the people we are discussing are similar people. In the social construction, they are very similar people. So therefore, I don't see a very big difference. The Telugu people will look at Tyagaraja Kirtana or the meaning and that connection. Tamil people will do the same thing with the Tamil composition. I mean, yeah, we don't go into the history and the body of work in Tamil-speaking areas, rather Tamil Nadu vis-a-vis Telugu-speaking. Very complex movement of art that happened between Kannada-speaking, Telugu-speaking, Marathi-speaking. All this came into the whole world. But I don't see a very big difference in that. I don't see. But of course, if I go to, for example, anywhere in Andhra Pradesh or Telangana today, they will say, can you please, it's a very interesting thing they'll tell me. So I may have sung all Tyagaraja Kirtanas, how much ever. But they'll ask me to sing Annamacharya. And this is a class thing, by the way. This is a class thing. You know why? Tyagaraja's Telugu is not considered pure Telugu. Okay, it's a mixed Telugu that has also Tamil in it. It's a kind of, local dialect from a person who migrated. Annamaya is, within quotes, the idea of purity in language, right? So that displays itself very fast.
And that social consciousness.
Of course. So therefore, and the connection of Annamacharya, his own position. So therefore, I find this very interesting. I would have sung all Tyagaraja Kirtanas, but they'll say, can you please sing Annamaya? It's very interesting. So there is even within certain linguistic community. So which is why I meant that they are similar people.
Right.
So therefore, I don't think you'll find a difference in it unless you traverse the verticals of society rather than the horizontals of society. When you traverse the verticals of society, then you're really having fascinating experiences. Then it's very different. But the horizontals, not very much. I don't think so.
You must listen to Krishna
Okay.
Ramar Janma Bhumi.
Sorry, I'm just going to have to wind up. Krishna, I'm going to ask you one thing, and the answer can't be no. Okay. But first, I just want to read a couple of lines from one of Krishna's chapters in his book, Southern Music. He says, music and the voice are inseparable. True enough, but was the voice created only so that human beings could sing, or for that matter speak? And then, long paragraph, the voice is Carnatic music. This intrinsic relationship is why every musician, and not just the vocalist, must learn to sing. In singing, the musician discovers music, voice, and with utter clarity, the person within. Krishna, just before we close, as part of your empathic journey with Perumal Murugan, you have again and again sung to Madhura Bhagan, right? Sing us a couple of lines.
Oh no, I don't have the words with me.
Any lines.
I don't have the words with me.
Actually, we had agreed that we would not go there. It was easily available and done to death, you know.
I don't have the lyrics of his Virutham right now. I wish I did. I would have sung it.
Sing Madhura Bhagan.
Yeah,
Otherwise, you'll have to sing for a book.
Sir, could you please sing Amar Janmabhoomi? Sir, could you please sing Amar Janmabhoomi?
No, I'm sorry, I won't allow that.
So I'll sing a few lines of that.
Or if you want to,
Yeah, I'll just sing a few lines of that because I don't have Perumal's lyrics here with me.
I can find them for you if you
No,
like.
it's not online. It's only the little paper which I have. So you can't get it. It's only one piece of paper printed once which I have. So, the interesting, just I want to say about Virutham before I sing this, is that if you take the verses of Perumal Murugan on Madhura Bhagan, it has an interesting resonance with an older Tamil mystic poet. And his name is Thayumanavar. And I've sung Thayumanavar also. And there is something resonating about the tone, texture, and the appeal that Thayumanavar also gives to many people, Nataraja, many times the Lord and Trichy, to what Perumal. In fact, I remember singing it for the first time, and most people in the audience thought it was Thayumanavar. And I said, no, this is Perumal Murugan. So I just say that, and I unfortunately don't have the lyrics with me right now. I didn't bring it, sorry. But I'll sing a few lines of Porumboku. புறம்போக்கு உனக்கு இல்ல புறம்போக்கு எனக்கு இல்ல புறம்போக்கு ஊருக்கு புறம்போக்கு பூமிக்கு புறம்போக்கு உனக்கு இல்ல புறம்போக்கு எனக்கு இல்ல புறம்போக்கு ஊருக்கு புறம்போக்கு பூமிக்கு புறம்போக்கு உன் பொறுப்பு புறம்போக்கு என் பொறுப்பு புறம்போக்கு ஊர் பொறுப்பு இயற்கைக்கு பூமிக்கு சாமகாரி கமப சானி சாமகாரி சாபதனி தபதமாமகரி சாக வெள்ளம் வந்து போன பின்னே கத்துட்டது என்ன வெள்ளம் வந்து போன பின்னே கத்துட்டது என்ன ஏரிக்குள்ள கட்டடத்தை கட்டுறது என்ன வெள்ளம் வந்து போன பின்னே கத்துட்டது என்ன ஏரிக்குள்ள கட்டடத்தை கட்டுறது என்ன மழை தண்ணி கடலுக்கு வழிகிற இடத்துல கான்கிரீட் கட்டடம் தேவையாக்கண்ணு சானி பதவ சாசகாரி மாகபாமதாவ சாமகபாமதாப மாபகாமரி சபாமதா முன்னே நகரத்துக்குள்ள நதிகள் ஓடல முன்னே நகரத்துக்குள்ள நதிகள் ஓடல நதிகள் சுத்திதான் நகரம் வளர்ந்துச்சு மழை தண்ணிய காத்திருந்த ஏரிக்கு புறம்போக்குன்னு பேர் இருந்துச்சு.
Well, friends, most of you have not realized that we have spent 2 hours already, which is one of the longest conversations we ever had in the history of Art Matters. But anyway, this was brilliant, illuminating, exciting, provocative, and celebrating both voice and silence. So thank you very much, M Krishna. We should have more of your conversations here, perhaps, a series of them, if you like, in which you talk about all kinds of things. Some of which you have been rather silent today. Yes?
Once a week.
Well, once a week will be too much for him. For us, there's no problem. And thank you, Ananya, for being. May I present you with flowers. Before we depart, thank you very much for being here. On the 11th of August, we have the Manikal Memorial Lecture. It will be in the India Habitat Center, to be delivered by Ashish Radyadhyaksh. Reflections from the very deep surface, Manikal's When God Films. On 13th September, that is the next session of Art Matters, when Thanvi will be talking about L.P. Tassitori, who was an Italian archaeologist, linguist, etc., who worked and who discovered Kalibanga. And then we have V.S. Gaitonde Memorial Lecture on 15th of September by Professor B.N. Goswami on Conversations with Gods, on the life and work of Manku of Guler. So you're invited, spread the news. You can tell your friends that if they come that evening, that would be the most fruitful evening they would have spent some time. And I'm sure none of them would be spending a better evening that evening. Thank you very much for being with us. Excuse me.